Good morning. My name is Reverend Stevie Carmody. I use he, him pronouns. It's an honor to be with you this morning, both here in person and virtually. I serve at the UU congregation in Arlington, Massachusetts, as the Minister of Religious Education. It's the same town where some of the stories I'm going to tell today come from, since it's where I was born, and also where I became a Unitarian Universalist. Now, when I sent the office this sermon theme 2 months ago, I could not have fully imagined what the past 2 weeks would have had in store, at least in this country. But amidst all the uncertainty, perhaps I'm not alone in wishing someone might just come along and set things right. Perhaps that's a familiar wish. Well, I'm here to caution us against that wish and to tell the good news of our religious tradition that might offer response to this moment. In high school, the candidacies of first the Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick and then President Barack Obama were so inspiring. These two Black men sought the state's and the nation's highest offices, and they won so decisively. Their campaigns were different. They used a lot of grassroots organizing, and there was a lot of energy with young people talking to citizens directly. The ground game was strong, and it felt like a moment of people power. I, as a high schooler, invested so much in Obama's candidacy, especially. My early political and religious identity was formed in opposition to the ever-sprawling militarism and imperialism of the Bush years. I first lived out my values in the public square, protesting for peace. My mom and I would hold signs on the street corner in the center of town, kitty corner from the UU congregation. Now, come February 2009, a month into Obama's presidency, and the troop surge, as it was called, in Afghanistan is announced. Instead of an end of war, this seemed to be an escalation. I was disillusioned and upset. It felt like a broken promise. Now, much has been said by people who are far wiser than I about how Americans collectively projected much of our dreams and our aspirations onto President Obama, the president who promised hope and change. I learned from that experience that that type of idolization should be approached with care and wariness. But I haven't lost hope. And the reason why is the title of today's sermon, the line I hope you remember going forward: don't believe in kings, believe in the kingdom. Don't believe in kings, believe in the kingdom. Chance the Rapper, the Chicago-based rapper and producer and singer, he wrote that line in a song that's called Blessings. It teaches us something about how we might be in community of values together. By don't believe in kings, believe in the kingdom, I take Chance to mean don't put all your hope in a powerful leader. Put your hope in what Chance, as a Christian, calls the kingdom of God. Perhaps in parallel, Unitarian Universalists might aspire to the idea of a beloved community. We understand beloved community as something to strive to become together, where all people are cared for and have what they need to flourish, where all people live in just relationship with one another and are honored in who they are. The beloved community. Don't believe in kings, believe in the kingdom. Thousands of years ago, the people of Israel strove to live their religious commitments too. When I read the early books of the Hebrew Bible, I see a people trying to live into a promise made with their God and failing over and over again. When I read these stories, I see something so human and understandable about this struggle. God promises to Adam and to Abraham and to Noah and to Moses that God will help the Israelites flourish, that God will favor them, and that God will give them a land to live in. To keep this covenant, the people of Israel must continue to worship and honor God. Yet over and over, the people turn from God, often worshiping other gods. And then some calamity befalls them, and they cry out to God for deliverance, coming back into covenant with God, coming into a relationship with God. The pattern happens many times throughout the first books of the Hebrew Bible. Now, I cite this biblical scripture not because I believe it holds some truth inherently, but spending time with it does seem to be valuable, a mirror to what we are like as humans together. So what do we make of these stories? What was important about preserving and sharing these stories of a people in covenant together over time? They were written down, these stories, by people who were in exile in Babylon and in Syria, wondering if God would ever deliver them again. These stories are a study in how to repair and keep covenant, which is another word for promises we keep together. And one strategy that these people often invest in is calling for a king, an idolized king. In the book of Samuel, this is very much the case. Samuel is a wise and old judge, one whose place was to interpret the law and counsel people. But with other nations rising up against the people of Israel, this is, for example, where the story of David and Goliath comes from, the people ask Samuel to anoint a king. Samuel, as we heard in the reading, pleads them not to do so, warning them with very strong words. That a king will take people's sons away and make them go to war, that a king will take people's children away and make them work for his profit, that a king will tax the spoils of their labor until you don't have enough to flourish. Wow. That is a very, very skeptical account of power. Samuel, the writer, characterizes the king as susceptible to a lot of abuse of power. But the people do not heed Samuel's warning, wanting to be like the other nations. They are worried for their safety. We turn to an idolized leader, to a king, often in times of danger. That's where I want to go with this whole taking you into the Hebrew Bible. We turn to an idolized leader, to a king, often in times of danger. I see this idolization of leadership a lot, and knowing that it often comes from a place of fear helps me have compassion for it. I lived here in Queens prior to moving to Massachusetts, and I think about tuning in to former Governor Cuomo's press conferences in the early months of the pandemic, and how much I depended on them for a sense of stability. Or I think about amidst the climate crisis, I think about the adults turning to the youth climate organizers, saying how this generation of youth will save us, even while the youth themselves are asking for us to join them, share resources and power with them, and to act ourselves. Don't believe in kings, believe in the kingdom. So what's the alternative to an idealized form of leadership? Put succinctly and in a very Unitarian Universalist response, It's a covenanted community. That's a big word for us here, covenanted community. A community where a set of common values, rather than an idealized person, are held up, are worked through, and are made more evident in the world together. Out in rural Texas in the summer of 2019, I was helping facilitate a group of emerging young adults gathering on retreat together at one of our conference centers, taking 5 days to deepen in our Unitarian Universalist theology. And the way that community held covenant together has taught me lessons about how hard and how powerful that practice can be. The folks I facilitated with were really inspiring leaders. So there definitely could have been that situation where we idealized them and allowed them to take control. Instead, we did the longer, harder, slower work of developing a shared sense of ownership over the covenant, over the values we had together across those 5 days. Instead of writing a list of community norms, we had deeper conversations, and we distilled in our covenant 3 values that we wanted to hold up together: community care, spiritual exploration, and just relationship. And each day we set aside time to check in about those values. How well did we feel we individually and as a group lived into those values? At first, the conversations were kind of like a performance. Everyone just wanted to have the right answer. But eventually, over days, we all could sense the group shifting, developing a shared understanding of what those values lived out in this particular context, with this particular group of people, in that particular place, could look like. Who was doing most of the labor of cleaning up the tables? Who was getting the most speaking time in the group? How we asked questions of one another so it helped deepen our understanding. How we accompanied people when they were feeling distraught. We talked about all of these things, and what was happening was the members of that community were investing something of themselves into the community, bringing their insights, their attention, their talents to a greater purpose. When conflict did come, and it did, when harm was done, and it was, there was a place and a shared understanding within which we could hold the conflict. We could be braver together then because of what had been done when the stakes were much lower. Don't believe in kings, believe in the kingdom. Congregational life and community life here in Unitarian Universalism can be hard and powerful work. This congregation knows this very well. Congregational life asks us to invest something of ourselves, not in admiration or worship of the minister or the board president, but to a higher purpose. As our closing hymn this morning will remind us, as one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free. How we navigate and tend our covenanted communities will always take time and effort. There will be times we fall out of relationship with one another and we have to navigate conflict. But ultimately, this tender work is what gives me hope, that what we build together may prepare us to live more deeply into a world more suffused with love, justice, and compassion. May that be so.
Hi, welcome to Getting the Message, Fourth U's recap of today's sermon. My name is Corinne Seeger. I am the Religious Education Assistant, and I use he and they pronouns. And I'm joined by today's minister, Reverend Stevie. Why don't you take a little time to introduce yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. I'm really happy to be here at Fourth. My name is Stevie Carmody, and I am a UU minister, and I work right now as the Minister of Religious Education in Arlington, Massachusetts, which is just a little outside of Boston. I use he, him pronouns, and I was going to mention that I grew up in Arlington, Massachusetts.
Wow.
So,
Full
as
circle.
I mentioned in the sermon, like, a lot of the, like, it's really incredible to get to serve a community that sort of formed me, and it's really kind of nice thing.
Very exciting, full circle. I, as someone that also grew up in the city and now is back working at a congregation in the city, it's so cool to have that full circle moment.
Yeah.
So in your sermon today, well, it was great to have you here this Sunday, and in your sermon today you talked a lot about benefiting the world and being a kind of a leader, benefiting the world. So what do you think the best quality that you have that you think you could benefit the world is?
I know we planned on this question, and now I'm like thinking it in a new way, so this is great. The thing I was going to say is that I think a good quality I have is that I'm really good with like second tries and trying again. And like it not going perfectly the first time, and like, you know, I think there was times in my life when I like really let guilt get in my way and would kind of go into a hole if I like messed up as a leader or like messed up as a community member, whatever that means. But like nowadays I'm like, oh man, I've made enough mess ups in my life that I'm just gonna keep trying, and this is why I wanted to answer this question, is I think it connects to Unitarian Universalism. That like we are part of a faith tradition that's not about like having the perfect action, but like keep try to be in community, seek repair when you cause harm, to really be responsible for our actions, and sometimes that means trying again. So I think one of my best qualities is to model that, hopefully, and then other people pick up on it too.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I think, especially today, where a lot of people are striving for perfection. It's really good to hear that, you know, you can try again. It's important to develop that skill because not everyone gets everything perfect on the first try, which is really cool.
No, it could really seem like you are, if you really let all of your process happen behind the scenes. Like if I have to write a sermon and then people are like, oh, you're such a good speaker. Well, I have to tell you, like, I gotta practice a lot to feel comfortable being in front of people. You know, like that kind of thing of just like, when we're in community, it's okay to let the mess out a little bit because we know we're like safe and supported, and it's just more realistic. It's like, oh, we need more time to not get it right the first time. Yeah.
So, speaking of keep trying, going through things,
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to someone who is, you know, looking for that leader, looking to start over? How do you kind of continue on that journey? Because that's a very hard realization when something doesn't work out, you feel very despaired. How do you make that next step?
Whoa. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, one of the things is that it's probably going to depend on something that's going to come from you as an individual, and there's going to be some of it that we're going to need to lean on other people. And I don't know exactly how to square it, but I just want to be a cheerleader for anyone to name to someone they love, someone they know is going to be a supportive ear, to their minister here, to the staff at Fourth, to like naming it and being able to bring it up with someone of like, oh, something didn't go well in my life, or I'm feeling like low on hope right now, or I'm feeling some despair. Like naming that out loud can be scary because like, oh, now we're addressing it. But I think when we send something out into the world, it becomes like It gives us a little bit more support, and now it's not just something we're bearing on our own, but sharing in how we approach a difficult situation. So I would find help first.
Okay.
When you're ready.
Love it. That's really great advice. So another point of your sermon that I at least took from was the difference between hero and leader. And the kind of looking for one but not the other.
Yeah.
In your words, dumbing it down to the lowest possible, what is the difference between hero and leader?
A leader helps people make things happen.
Okay.
And a hero is someone who does it themselves.
Okay.
And when we're tired and exhausted or in despair or fearful or worried or something like that, that answer of like, I need a hero, makes sense to me. Totally makes sense to me. And I'm here to preach on the fact that let's be a little cautious of that and realize that like we in the community have an answer, as Reverend Julian Omeka Soto said. It was like the closing benediction words. Yeah.
So,
can I add something to that I was thinking about as I was working on this sermon is, I don't think we use the word idolatry a lot, like in Unitarian Universalism, right?
That is not a UU word.
And, you know, my seminary, like, learning and training will tell me that, like, we get one conception of idolatry from, like, the Ten Commandments, and it's this idea of, like, not having an idol. But I wonder about it with people, like, when we idolize people or we put them on a pedestal or something like that. One of the things that we're doing there is we're, like, assuming they're gonna fix our problem, and also as soon as they mess up, they're off the pedestal. Give me the next leader to lead us or something like that. And that can be hard. And so one of the warnings I feel about all this is like, is actually about idolatry. Because a way to translate it maybe into a more UU kind of phrasing around this is like, let's remember to humanize our leaders. That they're gonna mess up, that they're also striving towards an ideal that we all are hoping to reach together, and they're also going to fall short. And not everyone should be hopefully be a responsible leader, but like this idea of like, oh, let's not dehumanize our leaders by putting them on pedestals, because I think that can be a trap.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
No, not a sense. I think that there's conceptions in today's society that as we move about as UUs or just members of society, that we need to kind of be perfect, and that all of our leaders need to be perfect, and that the second something goes wrong, it's time for a complete refresh. But I think idolatry is a really great word and something that has a lot of complex connotations, especially in today's society.
Yeah. I don't want this all to come off as like, oh, leaders should not be accountable for their actions. I really want to live in a world where we have accountable leaders,
Of course.
On every scale. But I just mean that there's something that we do to our leaders to like sort of, we sort of lose the fact that they're also a human that is also striving.
It's fair. There needs to be a middle ground too.
Yeah, that's a practice.
So thank you so much for spending the time to chat with me. Thanks so much for coming to Fourth U. Do you have any closing thoughts about your sermon today?
Wow. I hope that the message that people take away is that when I am part of a community of values, like a Unitarian Universalist congregation, yes, things will happen in the world that will be setbacks and get in the way. And what I really hope is that we keep our eyes on the prize, which is like this idea of like living more fully into our values, or making justice or kindness and more real in the world. And those are things that there's going to be setbacks and hardships, but like we can always keep striving for those things no matter what is going on. So I hope that's the takeaway.
No, really great takeaway. I really appreciate it, and thanks so much for being here. And we'll see you next week for more Getting the Message. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.